Nearly all children who grew up during the 20th century are familiar with the nursery rhyme of Humpty Dumpty. This modern version of the short rhyme runs as follows. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. So far, the story is quite simple. But there is a much wider story to how this nursery rhyme came into existence and developed over 500 or 600 years. This is the story of the strange historical origins of the Humpty Dumpty nursery rhyme. Humpty Dumpty has been around for centuries, but the modern, standardized version of the rhyme is largely derived from the version published by an English publisher and organist, Samuel Arnold, in 1797. This ran as, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. 80 men and 80 more could not make Humpty Dumpty where he was before. Slight evolutions occurred after that throughout the 19th century, until the 20th century version was arrived at. The Humpty Dumpty rhyme can be traced back to at least the late 15th century, and is an allusion to King Richard III. Richard III briefly reigned as King of England between 1483 and 1485, after his brother King Edward IV passed away. Edward was to be succeeded by his son and namesake Edward V, but as the young Edward was a minor in 1483, Richard was chosen to serve as regent until he reached adulthood. Richard can hardly be said to have honoured his brother's faith in him, and quickly placed young Edward and his younger brother Richard in the Tower of London, from where they never reappeared. The assumption is Richard had his 2 young nephews killed, and thereafter he usurped the throne. He did not go unchallenged in this, and Henry Tudor, a Welsh upstart, overthrew him in 1485 by defeating Richard in combat at the Battle of Bosworth Field. All of this is relevant to Humpty Dumpty because Richard suffered from scoliosis and was a hunchback. Additionally, his horse was allegedly called Wall. So, in later years, when figures such as the great playwright William Shakespeare wrote about Richard, they emphasised his humped back. When the rhyme refers to him falling off of a wall, this would seem to be a reference to his horse, which Richard is recorded as falling off of at the Battle of Bosworth Field. And the king's soldiers and men are a reference to his forces at the battle being unable to win the day against Henry Tudor's army. Richard III's story is the most plausible origin of the Humpty Dumpty rhyme, but several others exist. Some suggest that Humpty Dumpty is a derivative of a Swedish or Germanic fairy tale character, many of which were immortalized by the brothers Grimm and Hans Christian Andersen in the 19th century. This, combined with other pejorative terms which were used at the time to refer to people of shorter stature, would suggest that at least in the 18th century, before Arnold publicized the largely modernized version of the rhyme, Humpty Dumpty was a bawdy, insulting comedic figure of some sort, which term was widely applied to people when inebriated. One final interpretation is that Humpty Dumpty was the name of a large piece of ordnance or a cannon, which was mounted on the walls of the town of Colchester in the mid-17th century. During the 1640s, England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland were enveloped by a series of conflicts collectively known as the Wars of the Three Kingdoms or the English Civil War in England. Colchester was besieged during the Civil War between King Charles I and the English Parliament in 1648, and Humpty Dumpty was the name of a huge cannon atop the town's walls. The Royalists, the king's supporters, held the town while the parliamentarians besieged it. During this, the wall which Humpty Dumpty was perched on top of was shattered by parliamentary ordnance fire, and Humpty Dumpty fell off this great wall. The king's men in this interpretation were the Royalists, who could not remount the cannon and eventually, after an 11-week siege of Colchester, were forced to surrender to the parliamentary forces. Again, the theory that the Humpty Dumpty rhyme originates in the siege of Colchester in 1648 is speculative. What seems clear from all of this is that there is no one origin story for the Humpty Dumpty rhyme. It was a rhyme inherited from the early modern world from medieval times. Each successive generation reimagined it to suit the circumstances of their age. Whether that was Richard III falling from his horse in 1485, a cannon falling from the walls of Colchester in 1648, or somebody who had drank too much brandy and ale falling over in the 17th or 18th centuries. Each generation brought its interpretation to the rhyme we all know today. Thanks for joining us on this journey. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel for more captivating tales, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest discoveries.